You just spent a fortune on a Dolby Atmos home theater system. 7 speakers, 4 height channels, a powerful subwoofer, and a receiver loaded with the latest technology. You hook everything up, sit down to watch your favorite action movie, and wait for that incredible 3-dimensional sound everyone raves about. But something's wrong. The helicopter that's supposed to fly overhead stays locked to the front speakers. Rain that should fall from the ceiling sounds like it's coming from somewhere near your TV. Explosions don't wrap around you, they just hit you from the front. You paid for immersive Atmos audio and got expensive stereo instead. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Most Dolby Atmos systems are set up completely wrong from day one, and that's why they sound disappointing. The mistakes are simple, common, and devastating to performance. But they're also fixable once you know what to look for. Today I'm walking you through exactly what's broken in your setup and how to fix it so you finally get the 3-dimensional audio you paid for. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like if you're tired of expensive audio gear that underperforms. And tell me in the comments, which Dolby Atmos speakers or soundbar are you using right now? And what problems are you facing with it? Let's get into it. Understanding what Atmos actually does. Before we fix anything, you need to understand what Dolby Atmos is trying to accomplish because most people don't actually know what they bought. Traditional surround sound uses channels, meaning audio is mixed specifically for front left, front right, center, surround left, surround right, and so on. The mixer decides which speakers play which sounds, and your system plays them exactly as directed. Atmos is fundamentally different because it's object-based. Instead of assigning sounds to specific channels, the audio contains metadata describing where each sound object should be positioned in 3-dimensional space. Your Atmos system reads this metadata and calculates which speakers to use to place that sound in the correct location around you. The revolutionary part of Atmos is height channels. Traditional surround sound is 2-dimensional, spreading audio left, right, front, and back, but always at ear level. Atmos adds verticality by using speakers mounted in or near your ceiling, or upward-firing modules that bounce sound off the ceiling to create overhead effects. When a helicopter flies across the screen, Atmos places it as an object moving through space above you, not just panning between speakers at ear level. When rain falls, individual droplets can be positioned overhead and around you, creating immersion that wraps you in a bubble of sound instead of just hitting you from the sides. But here's the critical part. This only works if your height speakers are positioned correctly, configured properly in your receiver, and the room acoustics cooperate. Get any of these wrong and Atmos collapses into regular surround sound, or worse, into mediocre stereo that barely improves over your TV speakers. And most people get multiple things wrong simultaneously, creating compound problems that make their expensive systems sound terrible. Let's break down the biggest mistakes and exactly how to fix them. Mistake 1. Height speaker placement disaster. The most common and most devastating mistake is placing height speakers in the wrong location. People treat Atmos height channels like they're just extra surround speakers and stick them wherever is convenient. They mount them directly above the surround speakers, or place upward-firing modules on top of rear surrounds, or put in-ceiling speakers way too far back in the room. Every single one of these positions destroys Atmos because height channels have specific jobs and need specific locations to do those jobs correctly. For a basic 5.1.2 Atmos system, meaning 5 main speakers plus a subwoofer plus 2 height channels, those height speakers should go above or near your front left and right speakers, not your surrounds. The reason is simple. Most Atmos content uses front height channels to create overhead presence for what's happening on screen. A helicopter flying over the action, thunder rolling across the sky, voices coming from characters positioned above the camera angle. These sounds need to appear in front of you and overhead, which requires height speakers positioned forward in your room, not behind you. When using upward-firing speaker modules that sit on top of your existing tower speakers, place them on your front left and right speakers. These modules angle upward at around 40 to 50 degrees, firing sound toward your ceiling. The sound bounces off the ceiling and comes back down, creating the illusion that audio is originating from above. This only works with ceilings between 8 and 12 feet high that are flat and reflective. Popcorn texture, acoustic tiles, vaulted ceilings, or ceiling fans directly in the reflection path kill this effect completely. If you have problematic ceilings, upward firing modules won't work and you need actual in-ceiling speakers instead. For in-ceiling speaker installation, the correct position is not directly above your listening position and definitely not way behind you near the rear surrounds. Dolby's official specification says front height speakers should be positioned at a distance equal to your ear-to-ceiling distance multiplied by 0.7 in front of your seating position. Let's make this practical with an example. If you're sitting 3 feet off the ground and your ceiling is 9 feet high, the distance from your ears to the ceiling is 6 feet. Multiply 6 by 0.7 and you get 4.2 feet. Your front in-ceiling speaker should be mounted about 4 feet in front of your main listening position, not directly overhead. This forward placement creates the overhead effect for what's happening on screen instead of making it feel like sounds are coming from behind you. The height of upward firing modules or the elevation angle of ceiling speakers also matters enormously. Dolby recommends mounting the tweeters of Atmos height speakers at 1.25 times the height of your main left, center, and right speakers. If your front speakers have tweeters at 3 feet high, your height channel should be at 3.75 feet, which for upward modules means the module itself sits on top of your tower speakers and aims up from there. For wall-mounted height speakers, tilt them toward the listening position at the recommended angle rather than firing straight down. The goal is controlled, directed sound that integrates with your main speakers, not a ceiling full of drivers spraying audio randomly around the room. Mistake 2, surround speaker problems. While we're talking about speaker placement, let's fix your surround speakers too, because they're probably wrong as well. The correct position for side surround speakers in a 5.1 or 7.1 system is 90 to 110 degrees from center, meaning if you're sitting facing forward at 0 degrees, the surround should be to your sides and slightly behind you. They should be elevated slightly above ear level, maybe a foot or two higher than your seated ear height, and angled toward the listening position. They should not be directly beside you at ear level, because that creates an in-your-face surround effect that's overwhelming and unrealistic. The distance from surrounds to your listening position also matters. Too close and surround effects dominate inappropriately. Too far and they lose impact and presence. Aim for surrounds to be roughly the same distance from your seating as your front speakers, creating a circle of sound around you rather than some speakers close and others far. This equal distance helps with timing and integration, making the sound field cohesive instead of disjointed, where some speakers feel disconnected from others. For 7.1 systems with rear surrounds in addition to side surrounds, the rear speakers go directly behind you, or slightly to the sides at around 135 to 150 degrees. They should also be elevated above ear level and angled toward the listening position. The purpose of rear surrounds is to anchor sounds directly behind you and create the sense that audio wraps completely around, not just comes from the sides. Many people place rear surrounds too high on the back wall, almost at ceiling level, which makes them sound disconnected from the main sound field. Keep them at a reasonable height, about the same elevation as your side surrounds, for proper integration. Mistake 3. Front speaker placement issues. Even your front speakers, which most people think they've got right, are probably positioned suboptimally. The front left and right speakers should be at 22 to 30 degrees from your center listening position. Measure this by sitting in your main seat and imagining a line straight ahead. Your left speaker should be 22 to 30 degrees to the left of that line, and your right speaker should be the same angle to the right. This creates the proper stereo width where sound spreads naturally across the front soundstage without being too narrow or artificially wide. The center channel speaker is critically important because it handles most dialogue and on-screen action. It should be positioned directly below or above your TV screen, as close to the screen as possible, and at the same height as your left and right speakers. When all 3 front speakers have their tweeters at the same height, dialogue and effects pan smoothly across the front without jumping up or down as they move. Many people place the center on a low shelf well below their left and right towers, creating a disjointed front soundstage where the center feels separate from the mains. Use a small stand or riser to elevate your center channel if needed to match your tower's tweeter height. Avoid placing front speakers in room corners because corner placement causes bass buildup and muddiness. You want your front speakers pulled away from sidewalls by at least a foot or two to let them breathe and create clean sound without excessive boundary reflections. The speakers should be angled toward your listening position, a technique called toe-in, which focuses the soundstage and improves imaging where you can precisely localize where sounds are coming from across the front soundstage. Mistake 4. Receiver configuration. Nightmare. Now let's talk about receiver settings because even perfect speaker placement won't save you if your receiver is configured wrong. When you add height speakers to your system, you need to tell the receiver they exist and assign amplifier channels to power them. Most receivers have an amp assign setting buried in the speaker configuration menu. You might need to choose between different configurations like 5.1.2, 7.1.2, or 5.1.4 depending on how many speakers you have. If you don't explicitly tell the receiver to use certain amplifier channels for height speakers, those speakers might not receive any signal at all, even though they're physically connected. Once amp assignment is set, you need to configure speaker size settings. This is confusing because it's not about the physical size of your speakers, it's about bass capability. The standard recommendation is setting all speakers to small regardless of their actual size. When speakers are set to small, the receiver sends bass frequencies below a certain crossover point to your subwoofer instead of to those speakers. This lets your subwoofer handle the heavy lifting of deep bass, while your main speakers focus on mid-range and high frequencies where they perform best. The standard crossover frequency is 80 Hz, meaning frequencies below 80 Hz go to the subwoofer and everything above stays with the speakers. Even if you have large tower speakers with big woofers, setting them to small and using an 80 Hz crossover usually sounds better because subwoofers are specifically designed and positioned to reproduce deep bass effectively. The exception might be if you have truly full-range towers and a small or underpowered subwoofer, in which case setting fronts to large lets them reproduce their own bass. But for most systems, small speakers with 80 Hz crossover produces the tightest, cleanest bass with the best integration between speakers and subwoofer. Mistake 5. Distance and level settings. After basic configuration, your receiver needs to know how far each speaker is from the main listening position. This affects timing because sound travels at roughly 1 foot per millisecond, and if speakers are different distances away, their sound arrives at your ears at different times. The receiver uses distance settings to add tiny delays to closer speakers so everything arrives simultaneously, creating cohesive sound instead of a smeared mess where some frequencies arrive early and others late. Measure the distance from your main listening position to each speaker, including height speakers. For in-ceiling height speakers, measure the diagonal distance from your listening position up to the speaker, not just the ceiling height. Be as accurate as possible, ideally within an inch or two. Input these measurements into your receiver's speaker configuration menu. Many people skip this step or use rough estimates, and the resulting timing errors destroy soundstage coherence. Accurate distance settings are absolutely critical for proper Atmos performance, where height effects need to integrate seamlessly with ground level sound. Speaker levels need to be matched so each speaker plays at the same volume from your listening position. This is called SPL, matching, where SPL stands for sound pressure level. Receivers include automatic calibration systems like Odyssey, YPAO, Dirac, or others that measure your room and set levels automatically. But these systems aren't perfect and often need manual adjustment afterward. You can use a smartphone SPL meter app to verify levels. Play pink noise through each speaker individually and measure the volume at your listening position. Every speaker should measure between 79 and 85 decibels. If one speaker is louder or quieter, adjust its level trim in the receiver settings until all speakers match. The center channel is special because dialogue lives there, and many people find they need to boost the center a few decibels above the other speakers to make dialogue clear and forward in the mix. After running automatic calibration, listen to familiar content and pay attention to dialogue clarity. If voices feel buried or hard to understand, go into your receiver settings and increase center channel level by 1 to 3 decibels. This brings dialogue forward without affecting other channels, making conversations and narration easier to follow without cranking the overall volume. Mistake 6. Input and output settings. Your receiver's HDMI settings determine what audio formats it can receive and how it processes them. The most critical setting is audio output format on your source devices. This should be set to bitstream or auto, never PCM for Atmos content. When set to bitstream, your source device sends the encoded Dolby Atmos stream directly to your receiver untouched. The receiver decodes the Atmos metadata and object information, then routes audio to the appropriate speakers. When set to PCM, the source device decodes the audio itself and converts it to uncompressed PCM stereo or multi-channel, stripping away the Atmos metadata in the process. Your receiver receives plain audio without any of the spatial information that makes Atmos work. Check the audio settings on every device connected to your receiver. Your Blu-ray player, streaming boxes, game consoles, all of them should have audio output set to bitstream or auto. Also, verify that your receiver's HDMI inputs support the bandwidth needed for Atmos. Dolby Atmos over streaming services uses Dolby Digital Plus, which any modern HDMI connection handles fine. But Atmos from Blu-ray uses Dolby True HD, which requires higher bandwidth. Make sure you're using high-speed HDMI cables rated for the bandwidth you need and connecting devices to the correct HDMI inputs that support advanced audio formats. If you're running audio through your TV to your receiver via HDMI ARC, upgrade to EARC if both your TV and receiver support it. Enhanced Audio Return Channel supports the bandwidth for lossless Atmos formats, while regular ARC might force compression or down mixing. Enable EARC in both your TV and receiver settings, and use a high-speed HDMI cable certified for EARC. Set your TV's audio output to pass-through or bitstream so it sends audio signals to the receiver without processing them, preserving the Atmos encoding. Mistake 7. Skipping calibration. Automatic room calibration is not optional. Systems like Odyssey, YPAO, Dirac Live, and others measure your room's acoustics and optimize the receiver settings to compensate for problems. They measure frequency response to correct for peaks and dips caused by room modes. They set speaker distances and levels automatically. They adjust EQ to smooth out the response across all frequencies. And critically for Atmos, they optimize height channel integration so overhead effects blend naturally with the rest of the sound field instead of sounding disconnected or artificial. Run calibration from your primary listening position with the room quiet. Place the calibration microphone at seated ear height exactly where your head normally is during viewing. Follow the receiver's instructions carefully, often requiring multiple measurements from different positions around the seating area. The receiver averages these measurements to create settings that work for a wider listening area, but always start with your main seat as the primary measurement position. After automatic calibration finishes, listen to Atmos demo content and evaluate the results. YouTube has excellent Atmos test clips like helicopter flyovers, rainstorm scenes, and overhead effects demos. Play these and listen critically. Does the helicopter sound like it flies over your head, or does it stay at ear level in front of you? Does rain sound like it's falling from above, or just from the front speakers? If height effects are weak or absent, manual adjustments are needed despite running calibration. Troubleshooting weak height effects. If overhead effects sound weak or non-existent, here are the most common problems and solutions. First, verify your height speakers are receiving a signal by putting your ear near them during Atmos content. If silent, check amp assignment settings to ensure height channels are enabled and verify connections to the correct terminals. Second, check speaker distance settings for height channels. Incorrect distances cause timing problems. For upward firing modules, measure from listening position to the speaker module, then add the reflection path to ceiling and back down. Consult your receiver's manual for the correct method. Third, evaluate your ceiling if using upward firing modules. Test by standing under the bounce point. If there's a ceiling fan, textured surface, soffit, or beam disrupting the reflection path, upward firing modules won't work. Your options are in-ceiling speakers, repositioning, or accepting your room limitations. Fourth, boost height channel levels manually. After automatic calibration, increase the height channels by 2 to 3 decibels. If they become too obvious, reduce by 1 decibel increments until balanced. Testing and verification. Test with known good content like the Dolby Atmos trailer on YouTube. The helicopter flyover should clearly move from front, rise overhead, and continue behind you. If it stays locked to front speakers, your height channels aren't working properly. Check your receiver's display during playback to verify it's decoding Atmos. If it shows Dolby Digital or PCM, your source device or settings are stripping the Atmos encoding. Go back through your audio settings to find where Atmos is being lost. Play familiar movies and listen for improvements. Scenes with aircraft, thunder, or ceiling-mounted lights should have clear overhead presence. If you're not hearing dramatic improvement, work through the troubleshooting steps again. Quick fixes summary. If height effects are blocked or weak, verify upward-firing modules are on front speakers, not surrounds. Raise height speakers to 1.25 times your main speaker tweeter height, and reposition forward using the 0.7 times ear-to-ceiling distance rule. If overhead effects are completely absent, verify bitstream audio output on source devices, enable ERC on TV and receiver, confirm amp assignment enables height channels, and rerun distance measurements. If sound is flat without immersion, set all speakers to small with 80 Hz crossover, boost subwoofer by 3 decibels, ensure sources output bitstream, not PCM, and run calibration from the main listening position. If dialogue is muddy or weak, boost center channel by 2 to 3 decibels, verify center speaker is at same height as left and right speakers, and ensure center is aimed at the listening position. The reality check. Some rooms can't support Dolby Atmos properly. High ceilings above 12 feet, textured or angled ceilings, or architectural features may prevent optimal performance. Upward-firing modules require cooperative room acoustics. In-ceiling speakers work in more situations but require installation. For most people in typical rooms with reasonable acoustics, proper setup transforms Atmos from disappointing to incredible. When everything is dialed in correctly, sounds place themselves precisely in three-dimensional space. Action sequences become visceral experiences, and subtle atmospheric effects emerge, adding layers of realism. Final thoughts. Dolby Atmos requires attention to detail in placement, configuration, and calibration. Most people skip critical steps that prevent their systems from working correctly. Work through these steps systematically, test with good content, and adjust until you get the immersion Atmos promises. The hour or two you invest in proper setup pays dividends every time you watch a movie or listen to Atmos music. You'll rediscover your favorite content with new details and spatial effects. Your equipment will finally perform at its capable level instead of being held back by poor configuration.